Hello, Miss Peterson here. Just wanted to check in and read a story to my first grade boxes. This is one of my favorite childhood stories. My mom used to read it to me when I was little. I used to read it on my own when I was little, and then eventually I would read it to my sisters when they were little and I was a little bit older. This story is called No Jumping on the Bed, and it's by Ted Arnold. Now, you will notice that I am filming this video from this angle, and there is a reason for that you might find out might be connected to a challenge, but you'll have to stick around and find out to the end of the video. Alright, let's get started. No Jumping on the Bed by Ted Arnold. In his bedroom, near the top floor of a tall apartment building, Walter was getting ready for bed. Before turning out the light, his father said, "If I've told you once, I've told you 1,000,000 times. No jumping on the bed. One day it'll crash right through the floor. Now lie down and go to sleep." "Oh, just one more time?" asked Walter. But instead, he plopped down on his pillow and squeezed his eyes close. "Good night," said his father. He turned off the light and pulled the door almost closed. The room was dark and quiet, except for a soft thump, 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 coming from the room above. That's Delbert upstairs, thought Walter. He switched on his bedside lamp. If Delbert can jump on his bed, so can I. Walter bounced higher and higher. On his last jump, his hair brushed the ceiling. But when he came back down, his mattress creaked. The floor cracked, and the whole bed tipped sideways. Then down through the floor fell Walter, bed and all. Now it happened that Walter's bedroom was directly above Mrs. Hattie's dining room. She was more than a little surprised when a bed fell through her ceiling and Walter landed in a plate of spaghetti and meatballs. "I was not expecting company for dinner," she mumbled with a mouthful of meatballs. Said Walter. "Spaghetti is my all-time favorite." But before he could eat, his bed smashed through the table and kept right on crashing down through the floor. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, the plate of spaghetti, the bed, and all. Miss Hattie's dining room was above Mr. Matty's TV room. Mr. Matty didn't even notice a bed falling through his ceiling until a meatball bounced off his head. Miss Hattie tumbled into his lap, and Walter splashed into his aquarium. "I already had my bath tonight," said Walter. He wanted to stay and watch the monsters on TV. But his bed crunched through the floor, taking the TV with it. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Matty, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. Walter's Aunt Batty had just moved into the building. She was still unpacking when Miss Hattie, Mr. Matty, and a dripping wet Walter tumbled through the ceiling right into a box containing her rare Patagonian stamp collection. When he burst through the bottom of the box, Walter was a sticky mess. "I see you started collecting stamps," said Aunt Batty as she followed Walter through the new hole in her floor. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Matty, Aunt Batty, the stamp collection, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. Patty and Natty had worked 3 days building their dream house with blocks. Afraid that Fatty Cat might knock something over, they carefully shooed her out for the night. Then the upstairs neighbors came through the ceiling. "Excuse us," said Walter, remembering his manners. "We won't be here long." The words barely passed his lips when Walter's bed bashed through the floor and continued on its way. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Matty, Aunt Batty, Patty, Natty, Fatty Cat, the stamps, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. The last thing Mr. Hanratty ever expected was to see a bed coming through his studio ceiling, followed by nearly everyone in the building. "If I had known you wanted to see my paintings," he said, "I would have tidied up a bit." But they never once paused to admire Mr. Handwriting's colorful artwork. They were too busy splashing in his cans of paint. Then his floor caved in, and everyone followed Walter's bed down through the hole. Down and down fell Walter, Miss Hattie, Mr. Matty, Aunt Batty, Patty and Natty, Mr. Henratty, Fatty Cat, 17 cans of paint, the stamps, the TV, the spaghetti, the bed, and all. Maestro Furlingatti and his string quartet were astonished by the colorful crowd that fell from the ceiling. The maestro loved an audience, even if they dropped in unannounced. But when Walter's bed smashed through the floor and paint splattered everywhere, the maestro wished his audience would leave. And so they did, along with his string quartet. Maestro Furlingatti's practice room was also the basement ceiling. It was dark and quiet as midnight down there. Walter squeezed his eyes closed and tumbled through the darkness until he landed on something soft. Everything was in its place. His bedroom lights were out. The door was almost closed, and through it Walter could hear his mother and father talking quietly. "No more jumping on the bed for me," mumbled Walter as he lay back down to sleep. Suddenly, he heard a creak. The ceiling cracked, and down fell Delbert, bed and all. Down and down Delbert fell. So that was the book, No Jumping on the Bed. My challenge for you today is to go back through and listen to the story again. As you're listening to the story a second time, I want you and your families to see how many nouns are in this story that you can find. After you find the nouns for an additional challenge, you can tell whether they are a common noun or whether they are a proper noun. You can also look for plural nouns. You can even look for nouns that are possessive. That would just be great practice for you, and that is Miss Peterson's challenge for you today. Stay put for a reveal and a special guest of our T-D-Ed dance. Thanks for watching. See you soon. T-D-Ed. T-D-Ed. Past tense marker. Past tense marker. Spelled E-D. Spelled E